Dak Prescott, not so Big Ben Roethlisberger. It is NFL Live on this Thursday afternoon. I'm Dan Graziano. I am here today with this stellar crew: Louis Riddick, Tim Hasselbeck, and Jeff Darlington. We're going to get into all of this, starting with the return of Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott. You may remember that before fracturing his ankle in Week 5 last season, Prescott actually broke the NFL record for most passing yards in a 4-game span with almost 1,700. In fact, by the end of Week 6, which he didn't play in because he was hurt, he was still leading the league in passing yards. Of course, that injury cost him the rest of the 2020 season, but he's out on the field today with the rest of his team. And the Cowboys have said he is a full go for the start of training camp. So let's start with you, Jeff Darlington. What more can you tell us about the Cowboys and their plan for Dak this camp?
Well, Dan, we can start with what Dak Prescott said this offseason. Of course, optimistic players never necessarily indicating exactly where that player will be in training camp, but Dak said this offseason that he felt like he could play a game already if needed. Mike McCarthy, though, the head coach, saying that in the offseason they did put certain limitations on Dak. They do expect him to be full go for the start of training camp, also emphasizing if there are needs to pull him out of certain periods, they will do that. But they believe that Dak Prescott is good to go after having right ankle surgery in October to repair a dislocated and a compound fracture in that right ankle. So, Dan, all systems go for Dak Prescott.
That's great news. Obviously, eager to see him back out on the field and doing his thing. But, Tim, that was a pretty major injury. So, as he comes back from it, even if he is a full go, what kind of stuff are you looking for when you watch him out on the field?
Yeah, I think beyond that, it ends up being the mental aspect of coming back from an injury. I mean, many quarterbacks end up having left knee injuries because, when they step to throw, that's the knee that, the leg that gets rolled up on. And sometimes overcoming that is a bit of a hurdle. You may be cleared medically by the doctors, but where is your head when you have people around your feet? And that's what it would be for Dak. Like when a play breaks down and he has to take off and run, what does that look like? Is he... does he run the way he did, prior to the injury? Or is he more cautious? Is he willing to slide feet first or is he not? And so I think those are the things. Once you see that, I think you'll have a better understanding of where he is physically, but also where he is mentally coming back from this injury.
Yeah, Tim, those are great points. I mean, really, when you're looking at Dak, that's what you want to see. You want to make sure that really there's just no hang-ups or no reservations on his part as far as his ability to just cut it loose. And then in particular, I'll tell you what else I'm looking for with this team shifting away from the offense is the defensive side of the football, which is, although it doesn't have as much star power as the offense does, obviously, with Dak Prescott. The defense is going to be what ultimately determines just how well this team does this year. And it's really, to me, going to start in the middle of this defense with young Micah Parsons, drafted in the first round out of Penn State. This is the one individual outside of the quarterback who has to have a very real, tangible, impactful effect on this football team. He has to be the guy who really stirs the drink, so to speak, on the defensive side. And you're seeing it here in these highlights. He has to have a Deion Jones type of effect like Deion had for Dan Quinn in Atlanta. He has to have a Bobby Wagner type of effect like Bobby had on the Seattle defense up there in the Pacific Northwest. If he's not able to do that, if the 6 consecutive defensive draft picks that they drafted this year are not able to have a tangible effect on this team defensively, this team is again going to fall short of expectations, which, according to Jerry Jones and how emotional he was yesterday, simply are to get back to the Super Bowl. Not be better, not be above 500, not be competitive in the wild card round, get back to the Super Bowl. That's it.
I think it's a great point, Lou. When you talk about Micah Parsons, I was asked earlier this morning, most impactful rookie this season. I think you're on the money with Micah Parsons. If you think about this, there's a good chance, like day one, he's the signal caller. And you talk about like an epically bad defense a year ago. I think, maybe worst all time in terms of points, second all time in terms of yards for that franchise, in terms of what they gave up a year ago. Yeah, like he needs to be as good as everyone kind of thought he was going to be or could be for them to have a good enough turnaround where that defense can compete at a championship level.
Lots of pressure on the rookie, lots of pressure on the new defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn, there in Dallas to fix what was their biggest problem last year. Hey, the Cowboys are celebrating a birthday out there at training camp practice today. Star running back Ezekiel Elliott, he wore a helmet to practice, not that hat. but he turned 26 years old today. Just 26, feels like he's been in the league a while, and after last year's struggles, it can be easy to forget just how good he's been. The only players in NFL history to produce more scrimmage yards before turning 26, Hall of Famers Emmitt Smith and Walter Payton, who ended up ranking number 1 and number 2 on the league's all-time rushing list. So for more on Zeke and the Cowboys, we welcome in our Ed Werder, who's out there in Oxnard at practice. Ed, what's happening out there today?
Jerry Jones made Ezekiel Elliott the highest paid running back in football. Then he hired a head coach in Mike McCarthy who builds everything around the quarterback. So it's not a coincidence that Elliott, a two-time NFL rushing champion, played a diminished role and had the worst season of his career in 2020. Injuries to Dak Prescott and the team's best offensive lineman exaggerated Elliott's woes. I asked McCarthy today his expectations for Elliott this season.
He does so much more than just run the football for us. So he's a magnet full of energy. He's got so much natural leadership just in the way he goes about his business. So the production on the field is not a concern of mine. The production will be there with the opportunity. We have a clean start. Health is always a part of your success, and I think as long as we stay healthy, our success has a chance to be at a very high level.
Elliott reported here in excellent physical condition after spending the offseason working with Josh Hicks, a private running backs coach. Dak Prescott said this offseason that when Elliott's healthy and in shape, he's the best running back in football. And Elliott's proven that statement true in the past, but last season he led the NFL in one very dubious category. Elliott's 6 fumbles were the most in the NFL among non-quarterbacks, and McCarthy makes no excuses for that. Elliott cannot allow ball security to be an issue, Dan.
Thanks, Ed. Some news today on the NFL's continuing efforts to encourage their players to get vaccinated against COVID-19. The league sent a memo to teams this afternoon detailing procedures for handling COVID-relating scheduling changes, and some big stuff in here, including if a game is canceled due to an outbreak among unvaccinated players and cannot be rescheduled, it will be forfeited, with the team responsible for the outbreak being charged with a loss. Also, if a game is canceled, players on both teams will not receive their game checks for that week. And if you're vaccinated, you can return after you test negative twice. After a positive test, you can return after testing negative twice, whereas if you're unvaccinated, it's like last year where you still have to miss at least 10 days. This is not going over universally well among the players. Star wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins of Arizona tweeting, "Never thought I would say this, but being put in a position to hurt my team because I don't want to partake in the vaccine is making me question my future in the NFL." So, Lewis, thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think my issue with this, as far as people overall and their unwillingness to want to protect themselves and protect others, is this. Look, I'm a staunch believer in this science, and I'm a staunch believer in trusting people that have proven themselves to be credible to me as far as giving me sound medical advice all throughout my life. And I have leaned on some of those people in this instance when it comes to the decision to get vaccinated or get my family vaccinated and trying to protect them and protect myself. And they have presented me with credible scientific information as to the benefits and the risk versus reward, of getting vaccinated. On the flip side, when it comes to people who have decided not to get vaccinated from a scientific standpoint, the thing that I always have my ear to the ground in terms of trying to listen for is what is the scientifically backed reasoning as to why people are reluctant to get vaccinated, and what do they feel as though is not worth the risk of getting vaccinated. It's just not worth it to them. And that's something that I have failed to really at this point in time really hear laid out for me. And look, obviously it comes down to personal choice, and everybody has their reasons as to why they do or don't do it. But look, obviously right now the league is incentivizing players to make sure that they try and protect themselves and protect their teammates. And if not, if something goes wrong, it's going to cost them and they're going to have to suffer the consequences. And look, I don't necessarily see a problem with that. I really don't. I understand it puts some players in uncomfortable situations, and every player will react differently to this. But I just haven't heard a compelling argument on the flip side as to why people don't want to get vaccinated in that regard.
Yeah, and I think part of that, Lou, is people probably don't feel like they need to tell people why they're not getting vaccinated. But I would say this. I think what this does, DeAndre Hopkins' reaction, as well as some other players' reaction, gives you a glimpse into a little bit when numbers are released about 85% of these teams our roster sizes are 90 players. Those numbers really don't matter, and they really shouldn't matter all that much to the NFL from the standpoint of if it's the 5 guys that truly mean something to a franchise. Like, we all know that there's basically 5 stars on every team. Everybody else is just kind of a piece of the puzzle that is replaceable with somebody else on someone else's roster that gets cut. But there are 5 stars. Well, if the stars aren't getting vaccinated, then the NFL's got a little bit of a problem. And so this is a bit of a glimpse. This isn't Cole Beasley saying that he's not getting vaccinated. This is DeAndre Hopkins. And so I think now when you start to see this, those percentage numbers start to mean less and less to the NFL.
Yeah, I don't see the NFL budging on this anytime soon. They've been pretty strong in their belief that this is the way to go. So we'll continue to follow this story likely all year long. Today, however, we have much more to come on NFL Live, including the Steelers taking the field for training camp. We'll talk about what we can expect from their new look offense. We'll actually hear from Coach Mike Tomlin himself. And then we'll stick around in the AFC North. Baker Mayfield wants to win big for the Cleveland Browns, but can they keep winning and pay Baker the big bucks? Why Tim Hasselbeck in this offseason, and while it's still not done, Baker's not worried about it.
I genuinely do mean that I'm about ready. I think everything will play itself out. I'm not worried about it at all because we win, we're heading in the right direction.
Baker talking about winning there. If he wants to keep winning, he's going to have to find some consistency. Last year he had 8 games where his QBR was over 80, which is really good. Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes were the only ones that had more. And the Browns were 7-1 in those games, but he also had 6 games where that QBR was under 50, and the Browns were 2-4 in those games. So for the first time in his NFL career, Mayfield enters the season with the same head coach that he had the year before. He finished strong in Kevin Stefanski's offense and looking for more this year. Jeff, what can you tell us about where things stand with Baker Mayfield and the contract extension?
Well, for the moment, we don't have any reason to believe that this is imminent or even really close to getting done. We do have optimism from Baker Mayfield's camp, which has already expressed a clear belief that this can get done even without Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson's deals also getting done. So right now, Baker Mayfield believing that they have enough information from the market having been set that they could get a deal done before the start of the season. Of course, that is subjective to the fact that the Browns would put a deal on the table that would be to Baker's liking. So point being, they're open to it. If the Browns start to come to the table with a real offer, this could absolutely get done before the start of the season. But it doesn't sound to me like Baker is the one going to the Browns overly eager to necessarily get this deal done.
So, Lewis, whether it gets done or not, they have to get ready for the season. What's the biggest thing the Browns need to do to keep that momentum going with Stefanski and Baker Mayfield heading into this year?
But I think it needs to be, in 2021, more of what you saw at the end of 2020, which is a heavy run-centric offense and a passing game that is built off of that threat of the credible run-type game, because obviously Baker's statistics in terms of yards per attempt, completion percentage, touchdown interception ratio all jump up dramatically when the run game is credible. And there's a credible threat of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt absolutely gassing you. And then he really does benefit off of that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just a fact. And as long as they stay within that kind of framework and Kevin Stefanski continues to call the offense within that kind of context and Baker continues to exercise great judgment and great accuracy throwing the football, he's only going to get better and better and better and stay on rhythm and stay on schedule with this offense. And his numbers are just going to go higher and higher and higher. And really that just works in his favor as in regards to a contract extension. And I think building off of what Jeff just said, if Baker is to kind of take that, that mindset into this season and really kind of like bet on himself, he could really, really stand to benefit and cash in big time.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lou. I think when you look at his skill set, okay, we know he's an accurate thrower. And I think what would surprise people, he's got a much bigger arm than people realize. And so when you talk about play action, ability to push the ball down the field at times, taking shots, I actually think he's a really nice fit for what Kevin Stefanski really wants to do on offense. And I think, in many ways, if you look at what Kirk Cousins did with Stefanski in Minnesota, like you could see Baker Mayfield doing that and more. And so to that point, and you're exactly right about betting on yourself, like if you're Baker Mayfield, you had a season where you threw 8 interceptions this past year, like in 26 touchdowns. That's the best, touchdown interception ratio of your entire career. I would think that it even improves this year. I would think that his numbers across the board are better. And so if you're Baker Mayfield, I think you're better off being patient. I think he's going to have the best year of his career, and he'd be better off waiting to sign a deal until after the season.
Having the best year of his career and the Browns having to pay him next offseason, certainly not the worst case scenario for either player or team there. We have much more to come on NFL Live, including this. If you thought Marshawn Lynch was going to be the star of the NHL expansion draft, you were absolutely right. Check out him announcing a pick last night. And then mention this offseason, and while it's still not done, Baker's not worried about it.
I genuinely do mean that I'm about ready. I think everything will play itself out. I'm not worried about it at all because we win, we're in the race.
Baker talking about winning there. If he wants to keep winning, he's going to have to find some consistency. Last year he had 8 games where his QBR was over 80, which is really good. Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes were the only ones that had more. And the Browns were 7-1 in those games, but he also had 6 games where that QBR was under 50, and the Browns were 2-4 in those games. So for the first time in his NFL career, Mayfield enters the season with the same head coach that he had the year before. He finished strong in Kevin Stefanski's offense and looking for more this year. Jeff, what can you tell us about where things stand with Baker Mayfield and the contract extension?
Well, for the moment, we don't have any reason to believe that this is imminent or even really close to getting done. We do have optimism from Baker Mayfield's camp, which has already expressed a clear belief that this can get done even without Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson's deals also getting done. So right now, Baker Mayfield believing that they have enough information from the market having been set that they could get a deal done before the start of the season. Of course, that is subjective to the fact that the Browns would put a deal on the table that would be to Baker's liking. So point being, they're open to it. If the Browns start to come to the table with a real offer, this could absolutely get done before the start of the season. But it doesn't sound to me like Baker is the one going to the Browns overly eager to necessarily get this deal done.
So, Lewis, whether it gets done or not, they have to get ready for the season. What's the biggest thing the Browns need to do to keep that momentum going with Stefanski and Baker Mayfield heading into this year?
But I think it needs to be, in 2021, more of what you saw at the end of 2020, which is a heavy run-centric offense and a passing game that is built off of that threat of the credible run-type game, because obviously Baker's statistics in terms of yards per attempt, completion percentage, touchdown interception ratio all jump up dramatically when the run game is credible. And there's a credible threat of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt absolutely gassing you. And then he really does benefit off of that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just a fact. And as long as they stay within that kind of framework and Kevin Stefanski continues to call the offense within that kind of context and Baker continues to exercise great judgment and great accuracy throwing the football, he's only going to get better and better and better and stay on rhythm and stay on schedule with this offense. And his numbers are just going to go higher and higher and higher. And really that just works in his favor as in regards to a contract extension. And I think building off of what Jeff just said, if Baker is to kind of take that, that mindset into this season and really kind of like bet on himself, he could really, really stand to benefit and cash in big time.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lou. I think when you look at his skill set, okay, we know he's an accurate thrower. And I think what would surprise people, he's got a much bigger arm than people realize. And so when you talk about play action, ability to push the ball down the field at times, taking shots, like I actually think he's a really nice fit for what Kevin Stefanski really wants to do on offense. And I think, in many ways, if you look at what Kirk Cousins did with Stefanski in Minnesota, like you could see Baker Mayfield doing that and more. And so to that point, and you're exactly right about betting on yourself. Like if you're Baker Mayfield, you had a season where you threw 8 interceptions this past year, like in 26 touchdowns. That's the best, touchdown interception ratio of your entire career. I would think that it even improves this year. I would think that his numbers across the board are better. And so if you're Baker Mayfield, I think you're better off being patient. I think he's going to have the best year of his career, and he'd be better off waiting to sign a deal until after the season.
Having the best year of his career and the Browns having to pay him next offseason, certainly not the worst case scenario for either player or team there. We have much more to come on NFL Live, including this. If you thought Marshawn Lynch was going to be the star of the NHL expansion draft, you were absolutely right. Check out him announcing a pick last night, and then in particular did some sputtering. But here's Mike Tomlin on starting fresh with a new one.
We don't have the bar set real high. We were last in the league in rushing. So we got nowhere to go but up from certain aspects of that. It's not something that we fear, no. There's an expectation here that those guys are going to deliver, to be quite honest with you. I'm not going to be surprised when they do. As a matter of fact, we expect them to. And so, you can write a rags to riches tale if you so choose, like we're starting at ground zero or in the basement, if you will. But we don't see it that way. And we definitely don't expect our results to be elementary.
He calls it rags to riches. We're going to call it a tale of two lines. Last year, the Pittsburgh offensive line sustained blocks for 2.5 seconds or longer, less than 51% of the time, which is terrible. It was 28th in the NFL. The defensive line was a different story. Steelers actually led the NFL in pass rush win rate and collected a league-best 56 sacks. So, Tim, when you look at this Steelers offense, we saw how bad the offensive line was. They picked a running back, Najee Harris, in the first round. How can he and the return of Ben Roethlisberger help that offense and that offensive line?
Well, Ben Roethlisberger can help that offensive line because as a veteran quarterback, he's learned how to get rid of the ball quickly. So that can help in terms of pass protection. In terms of the guys there, I just love listening to Mike Tomlin talk about the 5 guys that he has or the linemen that they have there, not caring what everyone else thinks about them, but that they believe in them. And so I think part of what he's saying is Kevin Colbert does a good job with our personnel, and we think these guys can be good as a group. And then on top of it, oh, by the way, we just added this running back who we think is going to make everybody in front of him better. And truth be told, really good backs can do that. Is it about the offensive line and the back? Sure it is. But making people miss is also part of it. Running through contact and breaking tackles is part of it. And so, yeah, I think that kind of the combination of those things, Dan, Ben being good getting rid of the ball, the group being better than they were last year because they were so bad, and then a back that is a difference maker can make the offense better than it was a year ago.
Would be nice if they're a little more two-dimensional in that offense this year. Lewis, on the defensive side of the ball, we have seen how good their defense has been the last couple of years. A couple of key losses on that side of the ball over the offseason. So how does it look to you going into 2021?
Well, look, let me just first start off by saying I never thought I'd hear the day that a quarterback was defending a subpar offensive line, Tim. But you know what? Hey, you know what? I still love you, man. And I respect the hell out of you. But you know what? Moving on over to the defensive side, look, I think this side of the ball, Dan, has the potential, again, to be top 3 in scoring, be top 2 in scoring, heck, be the best scoring defense in the NFL, because I think that they do, when you talk about drafting and developing, they do as good a job of drafting and developing on this side of the ball as any team in the NFL. And really, it's going to start at the outside linebacker position with TJ Watt. And remember this name, Alex Highsmith, drafted in the 3rd round last year from UNC Charlotte, who's really taking over for Bud Dupree, who I think is going to have a breakout type of year, a double-digit sack type of year, because the young man has it all. Speed, power, tenacity, a thirst for wanting to learn more and develop more as far as his pass rush package. And I'll tell you this, if Melvin Ingram can come in there and be healthy, and those 3 together, Melvin, TJ, and then Alex, can together rush the passer with some of the people that they have up front with Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, and then in the back end, you've heard Mike Tomlin recently talk about how much in high regard he holds guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick. This defense is set, man. They are set to be top 1, 2, 3 in the NFL in scoring, which is what matters the most. And if the offense can be competent running the football. That's one of the words that Mike Tomlin used last year when we talked to him before Monday Night Football. If they can just be competent everything else will flow off of that. And if they can do that, this football team will be right where it needs to be. And believe me, this isn't just a desire of Mike Tomlin. Come from the very top, they want to run the football better this year. So that offensive line, Tim, it better be better.
Expectations always high in Pittsburgh. You know, they have not had a losing record since 2003, which was the year before they drafted Ben Roethlisberger. Hey, did you watch the NHL expansion draft last night on ESPN2? It was the Seattle Kraken making their picks. They had a bunch of Seattle celebrities there doing it, including the always entertaining Marshawn Lynch, who was there to deliver the Kraken's pick. Take a listen.
Yeah, with the first pick, we're going with the boy Cali, though. You know what I'm talking about?
Yup, Cali Yarncrow.
Cali Yarncrow.
Not a player who's on Marshawn's fantasy hockey team, clearly. But hey, that got us thinking. We've had NFL expansion drafts, not in a while, but let's pretend we're having one right now, and you are running the teams that have to decide which players to protect that can't be drafted by this hypothetical expansion team. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to throw out a quarterback, and you guys tell me whether you would protect him or let him go. Lewis, I'm going to start with you, and the first quarterback on the list is Matt Ryan of the Falcons.
Yeah, look, Matt Ryan is someone who, look, when the draft came up this past year, I thought they should draft his successor and have someone in the fold because I thought Matt may have 2-3 years left down the road. Okay, as far as going into the future, I would protect him. I would not go ahead and expose him to an expansion draft at this point because we have seen that quarterbacks with the increases in terms of strength and rehabilitation, rest and recuperation can play much further into their careers than they have in the past. And I think Matt Ryan's going to have a heck of a year this year under a new regime, and Arthur Smith is going to get the very best out of him.
Surprisingly, I'm going to disagree with Lou on this one. Look, at 36 years old, the past 3 seasons, he hasn't quarterbacked the Falcons to a winning record. Okay, due over $20 million this year. And Arthur Smith is in the first year as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. You know, he doesn't necessarily need to be good right now this year. He needs to be good in a couple years. And so for those reasons, I would actually make him available.
You know, it's funny, the contract might actually protect him even if the team didn't. Not the case with Jalen Hurts of the Eagles. Tim, would you be protecting Jalen Hurts from an expansion draft?
Oh, I would be protecting him. I got a quarterback on a rookie deal that I think showed enough promise last year to be built around. And so because of that, there's no way that I would let somebody else get their hands on Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see enough to where I would feel as though I could build around him and that this would be my quarterback of the future. And I think, quite honestly, given the fact that, some of the things you just alluded to, Tim, we have a new regime here. We have a new coaching staff, a guy who's supposedly we're going to be giving a couple years to in order to really establish his philosophy and his way of doing things. I would take my chances, quite honestly, on seeing if someone else would draft him and or if I could upgrade the position based on what he showed me in year one, which to me, subjectively, wasn't anything that I would be that excited about.
Carolina Panthers traded for Sam Darnold, so presumably they would protect him from an expansion draft. Lewis, would you?
Yeah, I would, because you know what? I need to know this about Sam Darnold. I need to know if he really is someone who has really hit his ceiling, or if the circumstances and the situation that he has been subjected to in New York were what caused him to hit his ceiling in New York. So I still feel, and I think Carolina obviously feels the same way. So let's just see. I would want to protect him and see if I could work with him and continue to try and develop him along the arc that everybody thought that he would take when he was drafted out of USC.
I like this game. I think I see Sam Darnold in a similar fashion to Lou, but I actually wouldn't protect him just based on the amount of time. I think that would probably prevent somebody from wanting to take a chance on Sam Darnold. You're running out of time. He's already 3 years into the league to evaluate him under his rookie deal. And so for that reason, I think I would roll the dice and make him available.
I like the game too, Tim. I think we'll do it again sometime. I think based on the way his first year in Tampa went, certainly the Bucs would protect Tom Brady. We're going to talk about him when we come back on NFL Live. Brady's going to return to New England right now as the Week 4 matchup between the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers and the Patriots in Foxborough. Former Patriots quarterback Tom Brady, you might remember, had a nice little 20-year run in New England, but he left last year for Tampa Bay, where he promptly won his 7th Super Bowl title while the Patriots missed the playoffs without him. Is he looking forward to the matchup?
I got a lot of familiarity playing in the stadium. I'm sure it'll be a great opportunity for me to go back to a place that I know as well as anywhere. So it'll be a great day for football. I'm not naive to the fact that there's some marquee games that you always look at over the course of a season, a matchup of, places guys have been versus where they're at now. It's just naturally there's more buildup. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a game, and we're going to get out there. We're going to prepare like we've been preparing. Our team at the Bucs has done some really cool things over the course of last season. I thought we got really good toward the later end of the season, and I thought we were still an ascending football team.
Tom Brady has beaten 31 of the 32 NFL franchises. Of course, the only one he hasn't being the Patriots, who he hasn't played against. There have been 3 quarterbacks who have defeated all 32 of the current NFL franchises. 2 of them are Hall of Famers, and one is surely headed that way. Brett Favre was the first to do it. Peyton Manning followed, and Drew Brees would be the one who will head to Canton, certainly when he is eligible. So, Lewis, you like to pick games. This game's in week 4. It's a little ways off, but who's going to win it?
Yeah, Dan, I think Tampa Bay will win this game, and I think the reasons why I think that, obviously, if I really were to just pick apart some of the things that Tom was just saying right there, in that interview with Jim Gray, he said this. He says he thought that they were really hitting their stride basically at the end of last year, and that they got really good at certain things. And the key word was, he said, I think we're still ascending. And I think with the fact that you're bringing back 22 starters that have a lot of familiarity with one another on the football field, have a lot of familiarity with a coaching staff that in all 3 phases of the game, kick, offense, defense, and special teams, all remains intact. And then you're talking about playing a game in the first quarter, first month of the season. That all adds up very well, or very much so, in the Buccaneers' favor. Despite the fact that I think the Patriots will be a Super Bowl team in 2020, not a Super Bowl, a playoff team in 2021, will be infinitely better than they were last year when they were just hamstrung by personnel deficiencies across the board for a number of different reasons. And I think it will be a close football game, a very closely contested football game. But I think Tampa Bay will win this because they just had too many things going in their favor. And they have what is obviously a very highly motivated quarterback who is letting his feelings be known in ways that he has never done before. And I think we all love that.
Almost had to tear up the rundown for a bold prediction there, Lewis. I'm glad you caught yourself. Tim, you're someone who's lived
man.
in New England.
Guys are always looking for a gotcha moment.
I'm just paying attention. I want you to know I was paying attention. That's all. I'm listening when you talk. It matters to me what you say. Tim.
All right, my man.
You have lived in New England, among Patriots fans. What do you think it's going to feel like in that stadium that night?
Oh, I think there's going to be a warm welcome for Tom Brady. There are a lot of Buccaneers fans that live in and around Foxborough these days, but I'm not sure they know much about the team's history. Look at that. The welcome will be great, and I think the emotions will be high for fans, but the emotions are going to be really high for Tom Brady. And Lou's right. Like the candid nature that we are getting, of Tom Brady right now, about him acknowledging that, it's not just another game. Like, how many times have we heard players, go back and play somebody and be like, well, I'm going to prepare just the same way. It's just another game. Like, no, it's not. Like, listen, I wasn't a fraction of the player that Brady was. But when I went to a team that had cut me previously, it meant something to me. So now magnify that times whatever you need to magnify it by to have the greatest of all time, a guy that has won, championship after championship in New England, and basically say, I'm going to go do it somewhere else. He basically got the last laugh last year because he won a Super Bowl and the Patriots didn't even make the postseason. But, there's just something about Brady that wants to, I think, just finish it off maybe just a little bit more to prove his point.
So, Tim, I've actually talked to Tom about some of this